What's a dark family secret you uncovered? I was the family secret. My biological parents started having kids as teenagers. For context, when my biological mom found out she was pregnant with me, she was 21, and I was their fourth child. They quickly realized they needed to get their act together. They were already struggling financially, had countless drug issues, etc. They decided that they were going to put me up for adoption. I was a baby. I was adopted by a loving family quite quickly, only about an hour drive from the city I was born in. Coincidentally, I ended up returning to that same city for college. My sophomore year, I decided to seek out my biological family. Turns out, my biological parents separated right after I was born. My biological mom is still in and out of jail to this day, but my biological dad was able to start a new chapter. He got clean and sober, remarried, started going to church, and built a legitimate career for himself. He told his new wife about me when they first met, but didn't tell any of his children. My other siblings didn't know I existed. Thanks to the internet, I ended up tracking down his work number and gave him a call. Later on, he said as soon as I said, "Hi, this might be really weird," but he knew it was me. Apparently, ever since I turned 18, him and his wife were waiting anxiously for me to resurface. They knew the day would come eventually. That evening, they sat my siblings down and told them about me. It was difficult at first, but now I'm 25 and me and him have a pretty solid relationship. My brother discovered we had a sister because he was hitting on a girl at the bar, and they got to talking about their parents. Turns out we have the same dad. He threatens to kill me whenever I bring it up, lol. My grandpa doesn't know that his dad was hit and killed by a drunk driver. He was like 2 when his dad died and can't remember any of it. The only thing he said was that he thought it involved a truck. I found the article of my great-grandfather's death when I started digging into my grandpa's family tree. I also found that great-grandpa was the result of a teen pregnancy and was raised by his grandparents. I'd tell him, but I'm not really sure there's too much point in bringing it up now. Great-grandma ran a hotel in the late 1800s near a train depot and army fort in the Oklahoma Territory. Turns out it was a brothel. Great-grandma was a madam. She must have been good at it cause she left a stack to my grandma. So turns out my mother was engaged to a guy. He went on a long family holiday to Europe. When he got back, my mum was with his best friend, my father. Before my granddad committed suicide, he was planning to kill every single family member in the house. Grandmom, my mom, my aunt, 2 uncles, few more people. Edit with more details. He had left a detailed suicide note blaming everyone for his death and his intention to kill all. Family speculation is that it was due to some extramarital affair he had and how the family was obstructing his path. My mom's family is still traumatized by this entire episode and no one likes to talk about it. I guess that trauma of waking up one day and learning that your dad, who just committed suicide, was also planning to kill all of you, is impossible to shake off in a lifetime. When I was a kid I knew my grandfather was odd. He'd call me his grandson, even when I was wearing a dress and clearly female, but my parents would tell me to ignore it. Then I found out that when my dad was a kid, grandpa sold my dad's sister Barbara to someone and kept my dad and his brother because he didn't want a girl in the family. My dad found his sister Barbara around the time I was in middle school via calling around to get records. They were reunited. She's my favorite aunt now. No one liked grandpa. Uncle Joseph is very probably a serial killer, a major suspect for the West Mesa bone collector. He is also convicted as the middle school rapist. One day Joseph was just sort of out of the picture, and no concrete answer was given why. At the time I was young enough that I didn't think to push or particularly wonder at the details. We have a set of plates our family uses only on Easter. My mom always fusses about that they are great-grandmother, pre-WWI family heirlooms. As someone who is interested in this kind of stuff, I looked up the Maker's Mark 1940s kitsch, at best. I haven't told anyone, because I have my eyes on another set of china, and I want to seem magnanimous when I compromise with my sister to have these. My dad was discharged from the military for going AWOL. He had found out his ex from when he was like 15 had his children back then and never told him about it. I have 2 siblings who are twins out there. I don't know their names or what they look like, but they're out there somewhere, and they're only 3 years older than me. My grandfather tried to kill my dad with an axe. Literally showed up to his place of work and went looking to cut him down, and somehow my unprepared dad fought him off barehanded. So grandpa escaped and came back the next day to finish the job with a gun, but my dad didn't show up to work, so dude offed himself in the parking lot, leaving the bitchiest suicide note ever. I've told the story a lot of times here, but I still can't completely grasp that it and the circus of other shit that surrounded it were real. My cousin didn't leave the family for 10 years because of her parents' divorce, like my parents said. She left the family for 10 years because she and her dad got into an argument, and he physically shoved her into a basement, locked her inside, and refused to let her out. He eventually got charged with DV, and she left the family because too many people were blaming her for getting her dad arrested. Edit. I need to clarify, because I'm realizing I worded this poorly. My cousin wasn't locked in the basement for 10 years. She was pissed that her dad locked her up and that the family sided with him, and she stopped talking to everyone for 10 years. She was in the basement for a few hours, as I understand it. My aunt was recently arrested. Why? She got pulled over and they found out she had a warrant. She got sent to jail. They found meth in her car. Turns out a large majority of people in my family are drug users. Also, a ton of the adults in my family are apparently molesting / have molested some of my close cousins and family members. Makes me wonder which ones I can even trust anymore. I can think of 2 off the top of my head. I'm sure there are more I'll think of. My dad's family was messed up. Secret 1. The disabled kid. My dad was pretty open about it, but I know they kept it hush hush within their community. IDK how it, when my dad found out, but he discovered he had an older brother, his parents' oldest child, Ron, if I remember right, named after his dad. When Ron was preschool age they were told he was mentally retarded. Horrified, they turned him over to the state and never spoke of him again. Years later word got back to them that the kid was not in fact mentally disabled. He had auditory dyslexia, now called auditory processing disorder. He grew up to be a fully functioning independent adult. He refused to have any contact with the family when my dad reached out. Totally fair emo. Secret 2. Pedophile. The previously mentioned Ron Sr., who disowned Ron Jr., was a child rapist. When they were grown, my dad and his younger brother learned that their father had raped their sister on multiple occasions and threatened her to keep her quiet. She didn't tell anyone until long after it all happened. Later she reconnected with her father and allowed him to meet and spend time with her children. Edit. Almost forgot. They found out after their mom died that apparently the youngest brother had a different father than the other 3 kids. IDK if they ever discovered the story behind that one. My uncle got his HS girlfriend pregnant and my grandmother drove her to the clinic for an abortion, agreeing to pay only if the GF didn't tell my uncle that she was going to abort his unborn child. It tore him up when he found out, but that hardly excuses his next actions. My mother gets pregnant by my father around this time and is not too discreetly offered the same deal, which my mother refuses with a few choice words. My uncle finds out, tracks my mother down, and punches her in the stomach for daring to take what was ripped away from him. My mother subsequently miscarried who would have been my big brother. My mom, the saint she is, forgave him and tried to help him get some therapy. He rejected her help and joined the army instead. I didn't find out any of this until I was an adult, which really ducked with my head, since my uncle had always been really close to me up until I came out of the closet. He somehow thought of me as the daughter his mother had aborted. My one cool uncle came to our house every Christmas. Thanksgiving was always really great and pleasant. Had a bunch of cats and dogs at his house. Was married to my aunt shortly before I was born. So one day my mom and I went to visit him and my aunt at his house, and there's this girl there. I think she was a year older than me, so about 15. My mom and I are like, "Who's this girl?" And my uncle is like, "Well, I just found out a few days ago that I have a daughter, so I guess this is your cousin." Turns out that before my uncle and aunt got married, my uncle had a pretty wild bachelor party in which a prostitute was hired. One thing led to another, and my cousin appears 15 years later to find her father. She was so sweet, and my uncle was actually really good about the whole situation. He even started paying child support to my cousin's mom, his idea. My aunt was also very forgiving. I've never met my cousin's mom,